Welcome, everyone. My name is Jeremy. I'm the executive director of the Northeast Organic Farming Association, and I've been running the organic land care program for the last, I don't know, 6, 7 years. We have a really great workshop for you today. We have Pam and Fred Newcomb from PJC, along with Sean Brecken from PJC, who's going to be going over organic turf care. PJC has been a huge partner of ours for many, many years, and they're a great resource to have in general. So make sure you have them in your contacts. Make sure you reach out to Fred, Pam, and Sean when you need some help. They've been a great asset to our organization. So I'm gonna go ahead and kick it over to Sean.
Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining the advanced workshop. Thanks to Jeremy and NOFA for giving us the opportunity to share our knowledge and program with you guys. Just wanted to jump right into it, give you guys a little background on who we are and what we do. Fred and Pam has started this business about 20 years ago. We're in Raleigh, Mass, which is on the North Shore of Boston. We consider ourselves environmental stewards, conservationists, and practitioners. We have what we call our ecological division, which is an application division. So we are putting the same products out that we sell. We manufacture and distribute fertilizers and conditioners. Everything is sourced in North America and manufactured locally in the United States, which is something that we're very proud of. We also develop programs for landscapers, schools, and municipalities alike, so that we'll dive a little deeper into that, but that can go anywhere from a high-performance athletic field down to a 5,000 square foot homeowner lawn. And I'm Sean Brecken. I'm the regional account manager with PJC. I've spent almost my entire career in landscaping, doing mostly native design and construction. I owned my own business for about 5 years before I started with PJC. I was a graduate of the University of Delaware in their plant science program about a decade ago. I used to be a certified horticulturist, and as of last year, I'm a AOLCP from the NOFA program. And I wanted Fred and Pam to take this opportunity to introduce themselves as well.
You're the CEO.
All right, just a quick hi, I'm Pam. I'm the CEO and Director of Operations at PJC.
And I'm Fred, the president, and I actually became an AOLCP, I want to say back in 2005, thereabouts. So a little after, a couple of years after we had started our business and our program, actually got affiliated with NOFA through the AOLCP program.
So we've got a lot of years of experience, and we're excited to share what we've found over the last 20 years with all of you guys. This is our PJC, what we call the organic turf care method. We've coupled a practical approach with the proven products that we manufacture and distribute. Our practical approach is based on soil testing, and then we look at what we call the healthy turf circle, which is soil chemistry, biology, structure, and cultural practices. We'll start with the practical approach, and we'll get into the proven products a bit later. This is our healthy turf circle. It's comprised of soil chemistry, soil biology, soil structure, and cultural practices. The healthy turf circle is really the keystone of our entire practical approach. Everything starts with the soil and how we can influence the soil to best grow the crop that we desire, which is turf. I really like this graphic. It's a simple one that takes a very complex system that is soil and kind of puts a percentage to what we're trying to influence in the soil. So we have mineral composition, solids, which is mostly your soil structure, organic matter is a nutrient and soil structure component, and then how we're getting our air and water into the soil, which is mostly a part of our cultural practices. If we jump right into our soil testing, like I said, everything starts with the soil. So what we want to do is examine the soil scientifically. We look at 4 criteria that we'll get into, but what I often get asked is, when can we soil test? And the answer is pretty simple. It's any time of year, so long as it's not within 4 to 6 weeks of a granular application. It's probably best to do so towards the tail end or before a season if we're trying to influence pH, so that way we know the rate of lime that we're going to have to put down. And then a how-to soil test, if you guys haven't done that before, is listed on your right-hand side. The benefits of soil testing, we get a soil chemical analysis from the soil test. So we're able to get a snapshot effectively of what's going on in the soil. It's not perfect, but it gives us a starting point to make informed decisions. We don't just want to be recommending things off the cuff. We want to really be giving a customer the best chance for success in growing turf. One of the benefits that isn't listed here, but is my favorite, is that soil tests are objective and scientific. I think often in the landscape industry, we can be having a dialogue with the customer that is revenue driven, or we're trying to maximize our revenues. But this kind of takes the emotions out of it and keeps things objective on what they need to best grow turf. A typical PJC soil test, the 4 criteria that we have listed on the left are what we examine, which is pH, organic matter, CEC, and the calcium and magnesium ratio. We'll get into each of these a little bit deeper in some of the upcoming slides, but just to give you a point of reference, we kind of consider 6.5 to 6.7 as an optimum range, or 6.5 to 6.8. 6.2 to 6.9 is acceptable, and that's kind of defined as slightly acidic to neutral. One of the things we wanted to mention is what we don't test for, and that's micronutrients. We don't perform bioassays or burst tests. I've interpreted these types of tests for customers, and I do believe that Fred and Pam used to do bioassays. But what we found overwhelmingly is that the soil biology is present in the soil. We just haven't created the conditions to allow them to proliferate. So we really look at the chemistry to create a habitable environment for the biology. So soil chemistry, that's the first component of our Healthy Turf Circle. Our goal is to maintain a hospitable environment necessary for growing grass, and we do so by correcting pH and calcium and magnesium imbalances. Soil chemistry, as it's defined, is the combination of mineral composition and the environment. I just wanted to discuss soil pH briefly. It's hugely important. It's the most important thing that you can do for the soil in terms of our program. If you're not familiar with pH, it means potential hydrogen. Like I said in the previous slide, we consider a soil pH to 6.2, 6.8, or 6.9 is acceptable. We really like that to be between 6.5 and 6.8 or 6.7. And to point out why, on the right-hand side is a list of the macronutrients and the micronutrients. And if you see between 6.5 and 7, all of those chemicals are available in their bioavailable form. So it's not just we chose a random number. These things are readily available for the plant when it calls on it. I did want to mention in the Northeast that most of our soils are acidic. So we often are dealing with trying to get those soils closer to neutral, neutral being 7. Looking at a deeper dive really into the soil chemistry, the macronutrients that everyone really knows is nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. That's the NPK that's listed on your fertilizer bags. Your secondary macronutrients, these are minerals as well: magnesium, sulfur, and calcium. And non-mineral macronutrients that often get forgotten are carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. We're talking about air movement and porosity within the soil, air movement above the plant, hydrogen and oxygen also in the form of water, and how we're making the plants turgid and allowing them to grow. The molecules listed on the bottom there are the bioavailable forms of the chemicals that we're looking for, or the nutrients really. So ammonium, ammonia, which is very similar to ammonium, but a little bit less stable, and nitrates. And then potassium is delivered to the plant in its elemental ionic form. Our micronutrients listed on the right-hand side, going back to our soil tests, we don't test for these. Turf plants are pretty simple. We don't really need a ton of micronutrients either, but if you see in the previous slide, starting with iron, these things become available when the pH is in range. So if we're able to correct soil pH, we're not going to have really any micronutrient deficiencies. The next component of our Healthy Turf Circle is soil biology. That's the microbial and faunal activity in the soil. So that's bacteria, earthworms, spiders, mites. It kind of encompasses everything. And our goal is to feed the soil biology with our organic fertilizers and conditioners to give them an environment that they can remain active and in turn feed the turf. This is a wonderful graphic. If you're not familiar with it or have some familiarity with it, this is the soil food web. And one of the things that it really aims to define is the relationship or the symbiotic relationship with these various consumers, as they call them. So your primary consumers are your bacteria and fungi. Your secondary consumers are protozoa, spiders, and so forth. And your tertiary are earthworms all the way up to birds. And trying to understand that they have this relationship that keeps both plants and animals alive. I did want to note, I read something pretty profound just a few days ago, that there's 7 times more bacteria in a handful of soil than there are people on planet Earth. Really trying to wrap my head around understanding the size of this energetic system that's just beneath our feet and how it's able to sustain all this life on Earth. Something to note specifically for turf grass is we're looking for predominantly bacterial soils. If you're thinking of fungal soils, think more of old growth forests. And if you're thinking of a soil that has too much bacteria, it's basically going to be a bare patch of dirt with weeds. So we want a healthy bacterial population that's balanced with some fungus. The third aspect of our Healthy Turf Circle is soil structure. It's defined as the way soil particles group together as aggregates, their shape and their stability. And we're trying to promote porosity and nutrient holding capacity by addressing organic matter and cation exchange capacity. Again, these are measurables in a soil test, so it gives us a good baseline and how we can best influence them. Here's 2 elements of soil structure that I was talking about. Organic matter, which doesn't necessarily mean organic and how we've come to understand it through food and through our landscape practices. It means carbon-based compounds, which is decaying and dying plants and animals that are within the soil. So they provide structural permeability. They're also great binding sites for the nutrients that we discussed in the chemistry portion. And they effectively feed soil biology, whether it's quickly or slowly, to help create a better habitat for those. And it also increases the CEC by providing more binding sites for nutrients. Cation exchange capacity, that's the measure of the soil's nutrient holding capacity. You're mostly measuring calcium, magnesium, potassium, sodium, and aluminum when you're measuring CEC, but it really captures all of the cations that we're discussing. Soil humus, so we'll get into it a little bit more as humic acids, but humus or humates or humic acids have very high nutrient holding capacity, which is why they're so important to have in the soil. Clay soils that you might see in the mid-Atlantic or Midwest are going to be a lot better at holding on to nutrients. And then unfortunately, where we are, the soils are very sandy, and sand does not have any nutrient holding capacity. So it makes it very important for us to introduce organic matter and humates to give more binding sites. Humic acids, so we were discussing organic matter earlier. They're fully decomposed organic matter is what makes up soil humus and humic acids. This is a really important note, that the CEC of commercially produced humic acids is 5 times greater than that of peat moss. I feel like when I started in landscaping, peat moss was the latest and greatest. We have since learned that adding humic acids is a more efficient way to deliver the opportunity for cations to bind into the soil. I often use humic acid or humates interchangeably with humic acid. Humates are the granular form or the solid state form of humic acids, and we're able to mix them in with granular products, and that's how we're able to deliver them to the soil. Are there any questions so far, Jeremy, in the chat?
None so far. And folks, if you have a question, feel free to put it in the chat.
All right, we're going to keep rolling along. The last component of our Healthy Turf Circle is cultural practices. And something to note, if we get those first 3 parts of the Healthy Turf Circle aligned, we have our pH dialed in, we're delivering humic acids to give better structure, we're feeding the soil biology, that's all well and good, but you can sink your program if you don't follow cultural practices closely. These are your day-to-day operations that lead to season success and ultimately year-over-year success. So they're not to be taken lightly, and hopefully we can provide you guys some insight onto why we do certain things. This graphic is a really good reminder of how short the true growing season is for turf grass. In the spring, we get a lot of shoot growth, the top growth of the plant, and a lot of deep root growth. The summer, things go dormant and it's hot, it's dry. We're dealing with cool season turf grasses, so they kind of want to go to rest. And then late summer and into fall, we get that last surge before winter. So it takes a whole lot of time to influence the soil chemistry, biology, and structure. So by rounding it out with cultural practices, we're really giving our best chance for success each season, and then essentially going into the following season with what we're doing in the fall, and then how we're coming out of winter and going into spring to make sure that things are awake and growing healthy. Mowing's the first cultural practice that I wanted to discuss. We love this moniker, mow high, May, June, and July. A lot of customers like really tightly mown lawns. It's really important to deliver that organic matter and allow the shoot growth to occur in the spring and be returning organic matter, allow that the top of the plant to grow deep or grow tall so that the roots can then grow deep. When you're mowing, be sure to only cut 1/3 of the grass. We want to just take that top part of the shoot off. We really ideally look for turf grass to be maintained between 3.5 or 4 inches or 3 inches to 4 inches. We like to mow without bags, but when weeds are in flower or in seed, definitely bag them and get them off. And something that I wanted to note when I had my landscape business is I would always have multiple blades in the ready that were sharp. We want to be cutting the top of the plant. Dull blades will tear the top of the plant, which presents opportunity for disease. And I always thought it was such a pain to be in the middle of the season to pull my blade and then sharpen it. So I wisened up. I had 3 or 4 blades ready to go throughout the season, and I would just swap them so that every time I was going out each month, I had a fresh blade to cut. This picture on the left, this is from Stamford, Connecticut. They have a great mowing pattern. This is a softball field, so they have a great pattern shaping the infield. And this field in particular has only been organic on our program for one field, and we'll have a comparison later in the presentation. Here's a table to show the desired height of cut on the left-hand side. So that's the height that you're going to want your grass. For homeowners, again, we're looking between 3 inches and 4 inches. The middle column is saying when to cut it, to just take that top third off. So once it's grown to 4.5 inches, to get it back to 3 inches, we're going to cut it right then. And that should be about every 5 days. For a weekly visit, you should be cutting at 4 inches or 7 days. And to me, this is extremely important because your typical homeowner is going to want 1 visit per week. So when you are able to discuss with them the labor intensity required to maintain a 2-inch height of cut, and you say that you and your crew are going to need to be out every 3 days to maintain that height of cut, it can help frame some of the program decisions that you're going to make with them and how frequently you and your crew are going out there. This second table, for anyone who's servicing athletic fields, these are the recommended heights for the height of cut for each of these different sports. When you think of a golf green, it's mowed as tightly as possible without the plant dying, essentially. So when you're looking at a sport like soccer or football, you're allowed to, or allow the grass to get a little bit taller. Definitely maintain it around 3 inches. It's not going to impact your foot speed. It certainly will impact some of the ball rolling speed, but if they have a green, healthy turf surface to play on, your client's mostly going to be happy. And I wanted to note that, these requirements are much different than a residential homeowner. We're looking at 1 cut per week for a homeowner. When you're maintaining a sports field, at 2.5 inches, you're going to be cutting every 4 days. So there's a big difference in what we're looking to accomplish here. Watering, this is incredibly important. Again, it's an essential macronutrient for the plant. We say that there should be a minimum of 3/4 inch of water going on turf per week, with a maximum of 1.25 inches. We think that 1 inch is just about the sweet spot. This is our adoption of the 1-2-3-2-1 watering cycle, which breaks the season down into how many days per week that you should be watering. So in the spring, try to keep your cycles to 1 time per week. On the table on the right shows the different types of sprinkler heads and the environmental conditions that the turf is growing in. So we want to be finishing our watering cycles before sunrise, or if it's, you have a very, very long or large system, try to be done, no later than right after sunrise. The reason that we have longer cycles for these full sun is that the turf is under more stress. There's going to be more evaporation of the surface water, and the plant is going to call on more water in order to stay cool at different times of the year. So when we're looking at peak summer, having 3 waters per week, getting a deep water into the roots, and making sure that the plant has what it needs to thrive. A lot of times people overwater, thinking that the turf just constantly needs water to stay alive. That's not really the case. It needs rest as well. It can't just be drinking it all day, every week. And these are approximate times that we've measured. If you have a crew member or you yourself want to test a new irrigation system for a new client, we call it the tuna can test. A tuna can's about 1 inch deep and a couple inches in diameter. You just put that in the middle of the irrigation zone and allow it to fill, and that'll give you your 1 inch measurement. Divide that by the times per week that you'll water at various times of the year. Water is a super precious resource. We have a lot of restrictions placed in our areas. So if you're able to limit and water efficiently, that's great. It's great for all of the environment and the turf grass, trying to keep it from going dormant. Core aeration is our next cultural practice. It's a mechanical way to reduce and alleviate soil surface compaction. What we're trying to accomplish here is, or what we're trying to do is get air and water directly into the soil rhizosphere, while also giving the capacity for nutrients and grass seed to get directly into that soil profile. When we're talking about athletic fields, we often recommend 3 to 5 aerations per year, because the soil biology can't keep up with the aeration needed for how the athletes are using the field with cleats, and there's different teams running on different parts all year round. For your typical homeowner, we recommend 1 aeration per year, and that's in the late summer or fall. And that's leading into what we'll get into next, which is overseeding and introducing various turf grass varieties. So the 2 main types of overseeding that we see are aeration and overseeding. Again, residential lawns 1 to 2 times per year. Just be cautious that when there's weeds present, it can often present the opportunity not only for grass seed, but for weed seeds to get into these holes and germinate. The other type of overseeding is slice seeding. This is a very efficient way to introduce seeds into the soil profile. It gets direct root to soil or seed to soil contact. So we have a much higher germination rate. If you have a very well-established lawn, this can be a pretty messy process. So you should probably stick to aeration and overseeding. But if you have a very bare area or looking to establish a new lawn, slice seeding is definitely the way to go. Some of the grass seed varieties that we recommend, that pretty much everyone's recommending, but these are your main cool season grasses. We have ryegrass and Kentucky bluegrass. And what I like to think of with ryegrass is that it's mostly going to be your spring performer. It doesn't take very warm soil temperatures for it to wake up. It shows up end of March where we are and performs very strongly into early June. Kentucky bluegrass, on the other hand, like turf type tall fescue, requires higher soil temperatures to warm up. So when you have a lot of, or a client or a field that requires a lot of spring use, you want to lean more on your ryegrass varieties. Kentucky bluegrass is a beautiful grass, but one of the notes that a professor from Purdue had mentioned that I always like to keep is that Kentucky bluegrass does what it wants when it wants. It's slow to present, but once it is, it's a stunner. Two other grass seed varieties. This is turf type tall fescue. I consider this the workhorse. It has low nutrient requirements. It tolerates sun, it tolerates shade. It performs best in the heat where ryegrass goes dormant and Kentucky bluegrass requires too much water. Your turf type talls are going to be dominating your turf stand, giving you the best chance in peak summer to crowd out some of those weeds and keep your clients' lawns green. Our fine fescue varieties, other people are probably familiar with Chewing's fescues. Those are more present in your shade gardens. So underneath your shade trees, obviously in that environment, the trees are dominating the water uptake. So they have great drought tolerance and they have pretty low nutrient requirements. Here's a slide introducing us into weed management. This is often the challenge in organic turf care. There's, I guess, over many decades, people have been using synthetic herbicides. And one of the things that I wanted to note is that herbicides are often classified as antibiotics, and we're effectively trying to feed soil biology. So if we are killing the soil life forms, we're not setting ourselves up for success. We're constantly going back to square one in what we're trying to feed for the turf plant. An emerging term coming from a lot of the universities is trying to reclassify some of the weeds that we think of or have thought of with like clover and wild strawberry as pollinating plants. These are great food sources for bees, which are fundamental to feeding all of our, or keeping all of our food sources available on planet Earth. So we want to keep the bees happy. And going back to synthetic herbicides, there's a quote that I've heard Pam say to probably every customer. It's one thing to kill weeds. It's another thing to grow grass. You could have a bare patch of earth with with no weeds out in your front yard. But ultimately we're trying to grow thick, healthy turf. So when we're looking at all of these weeds, we'll have about 6 here to present, but I want you to ask yourself, why is the weed here? And the answer always comes back to what the underlying soil conditions are. So crabgrass, a very difficult weed to get rid of, mostly because its seeds live for 10 to 20 years. So you could be seeing crabgrass on your lawn that sowed its seed about 15 years ago. And it's a very prostrate growing plant. So it thrives underneath the turf canopy. But again, why is it here? Crabgrass is mostly present in poor soils. So they have low pH. So again, we're trying to get that pH in range, and low calcium presence, which is a structural component of the soil. The next weed is Poa annua. So this is a turf type weed. You'll often see it. I call it a neon green color. It's a very bright green if it's mixed in with your turf stand. It grows very vigorously. It's very low. You can see in the graphic or the photo on the left how low it's mowed while it's still going to seed. So you could be mowing everything at that 2-inch or 2.5 inch, and this is still thriving underneath. So when we're looking at Poa annua, we say, why is it here? This is a cultural practice issue. This is because there's shallow, infrequent watering. So if we go back to the 1-2-3-2-1 cycle with deep watering, we're going to give the desirable turfgrass species the best chance to thrive, where Poa annua is going to thrive on those short waters that are 7 days a week, 6 days a week, and they just take enough of what they need. They have very shallow roots and they take up a whole lot of space. One of the big challenges with them is it burns off very early in summer. It doesn't have a graceful exit like ryegrass does. It just turns brown and people think that their lawn's dying. Probably the most recognizable weed by turfgrass managers is dandelion. When we're looking at it, or when you're looking at mowing it, make sure that you're bagging it when it's in flower or seed. Try to limit how much of it's there. And again, asking yourself, why is it here? This is a calcium deficiency. So pH could be in range. Everything else is looking good, but you're missing out on that essential macronutrient, which is calcium. So we want to be addressing that with gypsum. Plantain, this is a common weed that we see on football fields, very high traffic areas. It loves compacted soils, which are also bad at draining water. So if you're thinking of plantain, it's where a lot of players or people are walking frequently or doing drills, asking ourselves, why is it here? It's a low calcium presence in terms of structure. This isn't a calcium fertility. We're looking for water or porous soils that drain water. And this also can go back to the 1-2-3-2-1 watering cycle. So are we watering too much and giving enough surface water for the plantain to thrive? The last weed that we'll talk about is pineapple weed. It is a really cool looking weed. It has this little pineapple looking flower on top of it. Again, when we're managing it, we want to make sure that we're bagging when we're mowing, getting that out of there. We don't want to be returning clippings at that time of year, and asking ourselves why it's here. It's due to low soil fertility. So we want to be growing strong, healthy grass and avoiding feeding weeds with what's available. So wrapping things up on weed management, we say to grow healthier grass. A dense, tall stand of turf is your best way to crowd out weeds. Always be sure to ask yourself why it's here. These things are here because of challenges with the soil conditions, and we can address that with fertilizers, conditioners, and amendments, or through cultural practices, whether it's watering or aerating. And when it's absolutely necessary, opt for manual removal. Synthetic herbicides pollute our waterways. They cause a whole lot of problems. So when necessary, definitely pull them. The last part of our cultural practices are turf blankets. What they're doing is warming the soil canopy over the winter, which minimizes heat loss and allows for better air exchange between the outside air and the turf grass. And that will avoid winter desiccation. You'll often see, especially in the photograph, all those brown patches. That is dormant grass, but it's also burned grass from cold winter winds. It's a good way to cheat the winter sun. So you're able to capture the sun while it's in short supply and increase the heat that's available for your turf plant. And just as a side note, our high performance athletic fields, we require that as part of the growing program, so that when we're coming out of winter and the fields are getting used in early spring, the grass is already growing and it's ready for cleats and a lot of action. For a landscaper, if there's a homeowner or an estate that is having a wedding, something like that, this could be a really good tool for you to use to get early green up. If it's a May wedding, you can put this on, winter and keep it on into, say, late March or April, and you'll have lush growth growing. Give yourself a much better chance of success, and the homeowner will be very, very pleased. Looks like there's maybe some questions in the chat.
Yeah, we have a few questions here. Do you want me to read them out, or do you want to go in the chat and get them?
Why don't you read them out and
Sure.
we can
Yeah,
address
that way
them in the
everybody
second part.
So the first question we have is, what are your thoughts about no mow May? No mow May.
Yeah, so that's a phrase that we heard previously, and that's kind of where we heard that moniker of mow high, May, June, and July. It's so important in May to be returning organic matter to the soil. So mowing that top third, mowing high, if you want to maintain that 4-inch height of cut, you're giving a lot of organic matter back to the soil, which again is going to improve season over season opportunity for cation exchange capacity. You're getting more opportunity for binding sites for cations, and you're also giving food sources for the biology so that they can eat the organic matter as it decays, and then in turn put more nutrients into the soil so that when the turf plant calls for more nitrogen, it's available to it.
Excellent. So you're on board for no mow May in residentials. So we have another question from Melinda, who says, we currently provide lawn maintenance and have found many cost-sensitive customers request bi-weekly lawn mowing. Is it even possible to have a healthy cultural practice when mowing every other week?
Again, I think that comes back to adding organic matter into the soil. That's a really tough one. I wouldn't go more than 7 days mowing. That's just kind of part of a healthy cultural practice, and is probably worth having a more specific dialogue with your customer on how important organic matter is for growing their turf. Fred or Pam, do you want to mention something?
And the other thing too, just going back to that growth cycle for the cool season grasses. Certainly July and August of this year, you could have gotten away with a once a month mowing, if that. So it may not be bi-weekly, obviously in early spring or fall, but over the course of the season, again, I guess having to be a little creative in how you position and price your services around that, but not to be showing up, as I say, in July when the turf hasn't grown, and then, giving your client a bill for $50, $55 for showing up to mow their lawn. So it's what are you willing to work, how hard are you willing to work for those clients to maintain and give them a good service?
And I think the other thing to consider too is, in the peak growing season, I don't think it's possible to do bi-weekly because you'd have to cut off too much of the grass blade. And in so doing, you'd end up double cutting. You'd have to double cut in order to not leave the long clippings. That's the other issue you run into if you let it go too long, is you're going to leave long clippings and it's going to kill certain areas. So for you, it's more labor intensive if you're having to double cut the lawn. Because as Sean has said repeatedly, returning that organic matter is so important. And it's a plant. And so if you cut too much of that blade off, you're gonna just put it into shock. So I think that answer is probably no, if it doesn't suit the growing season. But as Fred said,
at the same time, it doesn't, I mean, traditionally in the lawn industry, we're programmed to go out to our clients on a weekly basis. And it doesn't matter whether that's May, July, or October. And the challenge is, what is the right amount of time, or how frequent do you actually need to be on their property to provide a legitimate mowing service? So it doesn't make it easy. I'm not saying that. I mean, we don't mow anymore, but it does require creativity.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that, when I had my turf, or my landscape business, turf was a part of our offering. And in July, that was the lowest billing cycle, because I would only mow every 2 weeks. It was more to keep things clean. And that could extend into early August. But early in the season, we really want to be getting that precious organic matter into the soil. So that's a tough one. It's a great question.
Awesome, thank you. A few more questions here. Sort of a two-parter. Are all herbicides glyphosate based, and is glyphosate considered organic? And then why does thistle show up in weed turf?
So no, glyphosate is not. It's not in everything. Glyphosate is a non-selective herbicide. So I guess the scientific component of it disrupts the shikimate pathway of the plant. So essentially it binds to where chlorophyll gets produced and forces the plant, any kind of plant, from grass to trees. It inhibits their ability to create their own energy. So if that was in every herbicide, we would have no green areas. So the other more common herbicide that you're probably seeing is 2,4-D. That's a selective herbicide, so it only targets broadleaf weeds. So that's why it's so commonly used on turf grass, because those monocots, those single standing turf plants, don't get impacted by it, while you're able to kill off generally ineffectively plantain, some of those others that we were talking about, plantain, dandelion, I'm blanking, pineapple weed. So it's able to address those. You're still going to have your grassy weeds, so your Poa annua and your crabgrass are not going to be affected by 2,4-D. And then I think was the second part of the question, are they organic? So certainly not by our standards or by USDA standards. Those, they're not allowed in organic crop production. They are antibiotics, so they kill life. They're really bad for the water. Unfortunately, 2,4-D gets into our waterways and it gets into our tap water, and it's used so heavily, especially by landscapers, that it just ends up in our storm drains, which ultimately end up in our water facilities and then end up in our taps. And there's no real way to dilute these things. They just kind of live forever, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I should also say it's glyphosate or 2,4-D is also not allowed. It's a prohibited practice in the standards for organic land care. And then the other question was, why does thistle show up in weed turf?
So thistle is usually presented in compacted soils and disturbed sites. The challenge with thistle is, I think it's the one plant that glyphosate claims that it can't kill. It has like an enormous taproot. Why it's there is probably because it was once a disturbed site, and getting rid of it is extremely difficult. Even getting to the bottom of that taproot, it's like 3 times as long as a dandelion taproot. So why it's there is the underlying soil conditions are poor, but getting rid of it, that's a very difficult one. I'm not sure in what settings you're really seeing it, but it's going to keep thriving.
We have another question here. When manually pulling weeds, do you recommend putting down some seed in the bare area?
If you have the labor capacity to do so, I would certainly recommend that. You want to try to establish turf as quickly as possible because an exposed site provides opportunity for weeds. There's like a Fiskars weed pulling tool that we recommend to a lot of customers. I think Pam might have one in the shed. So you're able to stand up and you're able to just pop the weed out. It goes right around it and gets a ton of the root on there. And then again, you'll have a slightly disturbed site. So if you're able to, I would certainly introduce some, I call it chicken feeding the seed. So you just take a small handful and drop it into the area.
Excellent. I'm going to put the Fiskars link in the chat for folks to take a look at. And then another question here. What is your recommendation seed mix for landscape lawns? Or what do you think is the optimal seed mix for landscapes?
So that's really site specific. And when we go through this next section, I'll go more in depth on specific mixes and what it could be for you. So that answer will be coming shortly.
Excellent. Yeah, I think that's all the questions for now, folks. You've continue to put your questions in the chat, and we'll continue right on.
Great. Thanks, Jeremy. And thanks everyone participating. These are really awesome questions. So I spoke earlier about the PJC organic turf care method is 2 parts. It's our practical approach. The second part is proven products. So it's partly soil testing, partly our program development, and then all of the product recommendations that we make to influence the underlying soil conditions. So I'll jump right into soil testing, which is probably our most popular service. Oops. So with some of our clients, what we'll do is we'll send you pre-labeled bags for soil testing so that when you're on a current customer or a prospective customer, you're able to take a soil sample of their lawn and that gets sent into a third-party laboratory, and we get this spreadsheet that we'll look at here in the next slide that's very scientific, and Fred or I are able to look at that and put it in an easy to understand format for you that comes with specific product recommendations so you can address each of those 4 criteria. So again, we're talking about pH, organic matter, cation exchange capacity, and calcium to magnesium ratios. And our report will have how you address each one of these things and how to do so throughout the season. So this is the third-party lab that we use. It's Waypoint Analytical. This is a soil test from Complete Land Organics, which is one of our customers in New Hampshire. So you see that it's not a very easy to understand table, especially for your average homeowner. What we then do is take this information and put it in what we call a soil test letter. So there's a letterhead with your company logo on it. We discuss how we can best address each of the 4 main components of the soil test. So you see on that left-hand side, it's the results of the customer's lawn. The middle column is what we qualify as the ideal range. And then the comments and recommendation portion is what we call the easy to understand. It's It's what needs to get done to best address the soil, and we give it an overall grade. So a lot of soils that we see are in fairly poor condition. If this soil test was from a customer that had really great soil, you wouldn't really see a whole lot on the comments and recommendations. We try to keep those inputs low and maintain a healthy soil. We're not trying to create a healthy soil. But in this particular instance, we really need to give the soil a lot of love to get it in the range to perform the way we want for turf grass. What we then do is take each of the soil tests of your customers and we populate this spreadsheet so that you're able to easily track your application volumes and what their program that they signed up for calls for. One of the good things with the soil tests that I failed to mention earlier is that when the client says, hey, you said my lawn was going to look great and it doesn't quite look as good as you said. So, well, you elected to not go for what we recommended. So if it was a poor soil like the customer in the letter had, they're going to need 5 or 6 applications of fertilizer and amendments throughout the year versus a healthy soil, which maybe is 3. So when you have that opportunity to kind of leverage, say, hey, if you want your turf to perform better, we really need to increase what we're doing. You get to point back to that soil test letter and it keeps things objective. And then in that lower portion, you can see that we have application dates, which helps keep you on calendar throughout the course of the growing season. The next one of our proven products is our organic fertilizers. So Fred and Pam have really done a good job of sourcing the best ingredients. We don't use urea, municipal waste, or manure. It's mostly legume-based proteins that we include in our fertilizer blends. We do have OMRI listed products, which will be on the next slide. One of the main issues with synthetic fertilizers is that the nitrogen is soluble. So when water hits it, the plant only takes up what it needs and it's kind of a force feed, and then the rest ends up in our water. That's why you see so many algal blooms, which is toxic for aquatic life and also toxic for our drinking water. So we use water insoluble nitrogen sources so that the soil biology has a chance to break these things down. Our formulations don't have any phosphorus in them, and we have quick release, medium release, and long release nitrogen so that we can accomplish different feed cycles throughout the year. So this is our lineup of organic fertilizers. Going back to our Healthy Turf Circle, we're trying to accomplish soil chemistry and soil biology efforts here. So the macronutrient profile that we talked about very early on, the NPK, we have 0 phosphorus formulations. So we have a 601, a 606, an 801, and an 806. The 601 and the 801 are derivatives of the 606 and 806. So going through the effort of OMRI listing them was not worth it in our mind, but they're essentially the exact same formulation, just without the badge. Our Eco Series, our 502 Plus, is a new product that we tried this year. And our 702 Plus is a tried and true product. We label these the Eco Series because they're a fertilizer and a conditioner. So we get that third part of the Healthy Turf Circle, which is soil structure. The 502 has added calcium into it, and the 702 Plus has added humates. So we're trying to address the structure of the soil and cation exchange capacity. I also wanted to just take a quick moment to acknowledge a tagline that Fred and Pam have developed, which is for the next generation. In selecting the ingredients and building this program, it was paramount to them that the next generation, whether it's our children or our children's children, had a healthy environment to participate in. So this stuff is very thoroughly analyzed, and we're looking for the absolute best ingredients to partake in this organic turf care program. The day of synthetic pesticides and herbicides and fertilizers is passing, and it's important that for this next generation, we're giving them the best starting point, and these organic fertilizers really seek to do so. Our 606 is more of a medium length feed cycle. So we kind of put in our program around a 6 to 10 week window that it's effectively feeding your turf grass. The 806 is a true long feed cycle. So there's short nitrogen available in it, medium chain nitrogen, and long chain, meaning the time it takes for the soil biology to break it down. So our 806 on certain programs is a great fall fertilizer. You get the potassium that you need going into the winter, but you get a 12-week cycle of feeding the grass. The next of our proven products are conditioners, biostimulants, and amendments. If you've noticed, the Healthy Turf Circles where everything's founded. So we're looking to improve the chemistry, the biological activity, and the soil structure in our conditioners and biostimulants. The Charge S3 is, I often tell our customers, it's our best product. It's Fred's creation. There's a quick nitrogen source for bacteria. It increases the cycling of nitrogen. There's molasses in it, which is a great carbohydrate source for the biology. And there's biochar present in it, which is a structural component. We're adding that carbon source back to the soil, which ultimately aids in your water retention. We are in development of a new product, which we are very excited about, which has intentionally a different makeup than the Charge S3, but will address the S3 as we call it, which will have gypsum and humates in it, which will do the CEC and calcium magnesium ratios. And we're also introducing chelated iron, something we didn't talk much about, but broadleaf weeds do not like, they love iron so much that they take so much of it up that they end up burning, and that gives an opportunity for the grass to really thrive while the plants, the broadleaf plants, are weakened by the iron. The last part of our products are amendments. We're mostly dealing with slightly acidic soils in the Northeast, so lime is very common for us. That increases our soil pH from acidic to slightly acidic or neutral, and it also supplies essential calcium for soil structure as well as the plant. Gypsum is the product that we use. They're both calcium products, but they do different things to the soil. Gypsum does not impact soil pH. It helps with calcium magnesium ratio by flushing magnesium, and it puts its calcium ions onto binding sites in the soil. Grass seed is something that we've taken a whole lot of time developing the essential blends for success in all areas, specifically Northeast and Mid-Atlantic. And at different times of the year, we recommend different types of seed and for different uses. Here are two of the grass seed varieties that we discussed earlier. Again, your ryegrass is mostly performing in your spring. We most often recommend a tri-rye mix, which is 3 different rye varieties at 100% rate. The premium athletic mix is targeted again towards more spring sports, which is an 80-20. The premium lawn mix, I think, to go to the individual had a question regarding lawns. This could be a great option for you with a spring overseed. Ryegrass, it doesn't take super warm soil temperatures to get it to germinate, so you can introduce it fairly early in the growing season. People have this pretty well established in about 10 months. And from that perspective, it's a quick grower and you're getting a lot of green grass early in the season. Your Kentucky bluegrasses, we often recommend a 50-50, which is very common for athletic fields. I think of this as a great football field or baseball mix. I think baseball playoffs, it's maybe not the application that you'll have for a high school use, but Kentucky Blue performs wonderfully in the fall. It takes warmer soil temperatures for it to perform. So early summer would be the earliest that you're overseeding, but definitely a great option for you late summer and fall. There's a couple of different blends that we sell, the 50-50 and the 70-30. On to some more blends, the turf type tall fescue, the 70-20-10 and the 80-10-10 are my most recommended varieties for homeowners. Summertime is when a lot of homeowners will call landscapers and say, hey, my lawn's dead, what's going on? And a lot of times it's because there's too much rye or too much Kentucky Blue in the mix, and it's not dead, it's just dormant. So giving them that opportunity to have growing grass that's green over the summer with your turf type talls. Again, they have low water requirements. They have high heat resilience. They're a very robust turf plant. And it's the workhorse in my mind. So it's a great option. And then some of the more miscellaneous mixes that we offer, the Shade Pro, which is under those shade tree varieties. And the Pro Lawn mix has a creeping red fescue present in it versus just the rye and Kentucky Blue in a 50-50 setting. Turf blankets, again, they're a huge offering. It's a great tool to have. We recommend them and require them for certain athletic fields. You could just see this is this is coming out of winter and just what it's able to do. So if you're growing or seeding late into the season, this is going to be your best chance for success, getting that seed to pop early in the spring. We most often recommend these in high use areas, so goal mouths, or a midfield for a lacrosse field, something of that nature. We had a customer this past spring. They were setting up for a graduation and they really needed to get the grass to pop early, so they used it on their main quad just to increase the temperature of the soil and get the grass active a lot or very early. And they're honestly cheap for how much of an impact they have. So they're a great investment. If you're a landscaper, just have one or two so that when you need them, the tool's available to you. The last part of our support services is our program development. So we take that practical approach and the proven products and help you develop a organic turf care business or division of your business to be profitable. So we work with you on soil testing, how to define your program. We'll look a little bit at the next slide or the next couple slides on how we scale those programs, how to most effectively price them. And then we'll catch up with you at the end of the year or throughout the year, say, hey, how are things going? What can we look at to get better? And one of the things that Pam really prides us on is picking up the phone. When you call, we're there for you. We're going to help walk you through what's going on with your business, or even just say, hey, a lot of our clients have become friends from afar. So we've really broken it down into the what you do, what we do. It's a very simple process, and it's designed to keep you focusing on growing your business. We do a lot of the back end work so that you don't have to worry about that. We'll align your calendar. We'll help you with pricing and make sure that you're competitive in your area. And all you got to do is just keep doing what you do and grow your business organically. This is a quick reference for anyone who's doing athletic fields. I often talk about high performance fields. This is the PJC standard. We have 3 tiers that we put fields into. So after we take our own soil tests and look at a program and what a customer can do in terms of budget and labor, and then we kind of put them into one of these 3 categories. So you'll see that there's differences on how many times a year you're overseeding, how many times a year you're aerating, how often products are getting put down. And one of the key things is the equipment you have. I think a lot of people will, they want the best, but it takes a lot of equipment to really keep that up. So it helps us keep things into perspective for them if they're still growing their organic turf care division, of saying, hey, we need to get a couple more things to help keep you going and give you a better chance of success. This is the categories that we'll put a typical residential organic turf care program in. So we have 6 different levels, which gives customers a lot of buying power in how they want to enter into the program. A level 1 is someone who has very good soil conditions, and a level 6 is someone who needs a lot of help. So we're doing a lot of applications to try to get them to a level 3 or to a level 1. And we do these soil tests every 3 years. So we'll provide what's called a soil test report card, which is a great, easy to read tool for a customer to say, oh, wow, my soil is actually improving. What you said was going to happen is happening, and my turf looks a whole lot better. Here's some before and afters. This is the city of Stamford, Connecticut. This is the Troy 1 field. It looks like the after picture disappeared. I'm not sure what happened there. But this was in 2019 when they first approached Fred and Pam about going organic. This field was very early on in the mowing slide that I showed you. So it's been fully organic for 1 year, and it just looks pretty outstanding. Oh, look at that. I didn't do that. That thing just whizzed in there. So that's a great before and after of just what 1 year of organic is going to do for you. This is the Cheshire Public Schools in Connecticut. This is a client of ours, Chuck Sherwood. This is what a high performance field hockey field looks like. You can tell that it's mown tightly because the ball needs to roll quickly. This field is fed the PJC Pro Healthy Turf 806, which is our highest nitrogen product that we sell. And obviously, in order to keep a high performance field, high performance, we recommend the best product to go down on it. This is a home in Bedford, New Hampshire. This is our client, Britt, with Complete Land Organics. She's done a wonderful job of getting a lot of homeowners on board with organic turf care in New Hampshire. I think she may be on this call, so shout out to Britt and everything that she's doing. One of the leaders in New England in organic turf care. This is Ardsley, New York. This is their main football field. I think they've been a customer for over 10 years at least now. They're one of the earliest adopters of the organic turf care. They do an outstanding job of getting products down, getting it done in a timely fashion. This field gets 606, which is our medium feed cycle. They get 4 applications a year, and they stay on top of overseeding. They do a wonderful job. This is our research and development trial lawn in Raleigh, Mass. this is where we test out all of our products and make sure that they work, which you can see that they are proven and do a good job. This is a customer, homeowner in Topsfield. You know, not only is our stuff safe for families and pets, it's safe for your chickens. So make sure that they're eating if you're going to eat their eggs. That's the end of the presentation. It looks like we got a few more questions in the chat, maybe.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. Do have a few more questions here. Let me reopen the chat. So from the last one, thoughts on removing moss by dethatching.
And I'm assuming it's a shady area. So a lot of that moss is most likely present because of the shade and probably the inability of the soil to get water lower into the profile. We often consider thatch to just be, it gets consumed by soil biology. So if you're seeking to remove it, mechanical removal is probably your best bet. But I would again, look to your cultural practices, ask why it's here. It's a damp site, maybe not a ton of airflow.
Yes. A question here from Dana Miller out in Rhode Island. What might I expect on the lawn if I bumped up from a 606 to an 806?
So you're mostly just going to give a longer feed cycle. So the 806 will have a short feed cycle all the way to this. There's feather meal in the product, so it takes a long time for the soil biology to break it down, and it nitrifies the feather meal. So you'll probably have a more robust plant, but you'll also just have a longer feed cycle.
Another question here. What is your recommendation on getting rid of bent grass? And also, what are your thoughts on cinnamon bark for crabgrass?
Bent grass, that'll be in a similar category to Poa annua. It's that low prostrate growing aspect. I don't know how bad the area is, quote unquote. If possible, I would recommend sod cutting it out and restarting. But if you have to, I would just overseed very aggressively in those areas with your desired turf varieties and limit your watering cycles to try to encourage deep growth.
And then thoughts on cinnamon bark to get rid of crabgrass?
I don't know if I have any familiarity with that.
Yeah, I haven't heard that either. So anybody
I
has
have
any?
heard of corn gluten early in the season can help with that, but I'm really curious about cinnamon bark, so I'm going to write it down.
Another question here about grub applications. What is your grub application?
So there's actually a field in Stamford, Connecticut that had high grub population, and it was present mostly in their Poa annua. So there is a product that we resell, a couple. So there's Grub Gone, which is a granular app a couple times a year or 3 times a year that should help that population. Another thing is Cedar Cure, which just basically binds it's a cedar oil, so it'll bind the grub and it can't actually move, as I understand it. There's also some research emerging about chitosan or chitin consuming bacteria. I think the jaw of a grub is this like chitin product, and there's bacteria that really like it. So once the soil biology kind of sustain themselves, it seems like our grub populations decrease because these bacteria eat them in the early stages of their life cycle, and these problems kind of take care of themselves. And over time, what we've really seen is a lawn that's been organic for, even as short as 2 years. But if you're thinking of a lawn 4 years organic, we don't see grub issues. Everything in the soil really starts to police itself, and we don't see an abundance of grubs, if ever. And the root structure of the turf is so healthy that you don't really even see signs of it. But it's a great question. It's definitely, it's a tough part when you're in your transition period.
Definitely. Do you recommend overseeding every year?
Absolutely. I think seed is probably the most underutilized tool in a program, whether it's synthetic or organic. It's essential to an organic program. So I would most certainly be overseeding at least once a year. Take advantage of the fall temps and the rain of late summer and fall to get that done. The soil temps are ideal. And you always want to be introducing new turf grass. You know, it's essentially a crop. So we always have to be bringing in new plants to kind of reinvigorate the young and medium middle-aged grass, I suppose, are a little bit more have a little more fervor to them. But as grass ages, it doesn't have the same resilience that it did when it was young.
And then we have a question about fall strawberry that's been getting out of control. This person, Julie, they've been doing some mechanical stuff, but it's not making a dent. Do you have any recommendations for that?
That's a tough one. Do you want to take that, Fred?
Well, just in my experience, fall strawberry is really an underlying condition or indicator of poor underlying fertility. So the soil and whatever you're doing with it, it's not providing the nutrients that the turf grass needs to grow. And as a result, it's manifesting itself with a healthy patch of fall strawberry.
So do they need more organic fertilizer?
That would be my recommendation. But, soil tests, what's going, back to the kind of the beginning, what are the underlying chemical and structural soil conditions, and then get on a fertility program to address any deficiencies highlighted in the soil test.
Right, and because the grass does need NPK, and that's sometimes in the organic program, we think that we're not going to need to fertilize, and that's not true. In general, you're looking to get 3 pounds down about in a season, and then taking into account returning your grass clippings, what you're getting out of that. So kind of backing into it, because it does need the N.
Yeah, I mean, with all the grass that we have, the reality is it's not native to our area. So we need to do something to foster its growth. And the other reality is turf grass is the largest irrigated crop we have in the United States. So I think what Sean has talked about here really helps address an alternative way to create healthy grass and a healthy ecosystem.
Well, thank you. We have another question coming in here. To overcome a severely compacted clay soil, should it be aerated and overseeded twice a year as a best way to reduce compaction?
Definitely aerating is a good place to start. That's our mechanical way of alleviating that. A lot of that compactions in clay is due to high magnesium content. So if we're able to apply gypsum, you kind of flush magnesium ions off of the clay structures and replace them with calcium ions, and that helps create more porosity. So it'll alleviate compaction by having more calcium present in the soil. So it's a bit of a two-parter. In terms of overseeding when aerating, I just think aerating so labor intensive that you should take advantage of the open pore space and get seed and your granular nutrients directly into that rhizosphere.
And this is a great question here, and it's something actually we've been trying to address here at NOFA for many years, and certainly is on our mind this year. But Sean, so what kind of conversation would you suggest having with clients who disregards everything you just reviewed, for example, and only opt to use any chemical possible to achieve a green turf? It's a great question.
Yeah, that's always a tough one. I think there's a lot of naysayers or people that maybe don't consider it, the healthiest available option. I think something that really affects all people is pollution, and there's overwhelming science now of the carcinogenic properties of synthetic fertilizers and pesticides, which, that's far above any of our hands and how that stuff gets identified as carcinogenic and toxic. So that stuff is starting to emerge in the forefront, which gives the organic category a lot more footing to stand on. In terms of that dialogue, if you have organic clients that are happy and you have these before and afters, the proof is in the pudding. We have customers that have been with us for a decade, and their grass looks better than most other people. And the year-over-year success of an organic program speaks for itself. A client, they're eventually going to see that their inputs go down on an organic turf care program. After 4 or 5 years, you don't have to be putting down as much lime or putting down some of these conditioners. You're really just on a 3-time-a-year fertilization, and their grass is still performing so well. Again, I think it's the proof is in the pudding.
Yeah. And I'd say too, having what we're trying to do here at NOFA is a lot of homeowner education, because it has to come from both sides, landscaper training and also homeowner training too, so that they understand the benefits of an organic lawn, as Sean was describing. We have another question here from Greg. What is the best time of year to apply mycorrhizal fungi?
This is a good question. I've gotten this question before from one of our clients, and we look to really balance bacterial and fungal populations in the soil. And again, with turf grass, we're looking for a predominant bacterial soil microbiome. So we're not super interested in fungal populations. There's a thing called the carbon to nitrogen ratio, which identifies the length of time that it takes for soil biology to break organic matter down into bioavailable nutrients. And for turf grass, bacteria operate in a carbon to nitrogen ratio of 50-1 and less. So feather meal, for example, something that's in the 806, it's a 50-1 ratio. So it takes a long time for the biology to break it down. For context, fungus operate at 50-1 and over. So an oak stand that's in, old growth oak stand, that carbon to nitrogen ratio is 800-1. So when you think of where you're seeing a lot of fungus present, it's on dead and decaying logs. It's a part of these old growth energetic systems. Fungus takes a whole lot of time to break these complex carbon chains down into minerals that are available to plants. Turf grass, we're just trying to feed very quickly. So something like blood meal is a readily available food source for bacteria, and that has a carbon to nitrogen ratio of 4-1. So it gets in the soil, the bacteria consume it, and they turn it into nitrates. That process in a forest, that could take 1,000 years for fungus to turn something into an energy source. So So I guess to answer the question, we don't really consider mycorrhizal fungi a part of a healthy turf program. I could most definitely see using that as part of a garden or landscape program, though, with trees and shrubs.
Awesome. So it looks like we're coming up perfect timing here, 2:32. If anyone has any last minute questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. You have PJC contact information down here as well. So thank you so much, Sean, for talking with us today. Thank you, Pam, and Fred for coming out as well. We really appreciate it. Like, you know, an organic turf doesn't have to be a mystery. You have people doing it really well. AOLCP is doing it really well, like the folks at PJC. So thank you everyone again for coming. This is recorded, so I'll send out the recording once it's up and ready toward the end of the week. And for those of you who want to join us, we have our winter conference / annual gathering in March. I'll send out the information of that as well. That'll be 20-30 workshops. And we'll have a live portion of the conference as well in Middletown. So I'll send that information out to everybody. But thank you all. Thank you, Sean, Fred, and Pam. And then, you know, feel free to reach out with any questions.
Yeah, thank you guys. Thanks, Jeremy and NOFA. And thanks to all the participants. We hope that you learned a bit about what we're doing and can benefit your organic turf care program. Merry Christmas and happy holidays to everyone. I hope you enjoy them.
Thanks everyone.